everyone to the May 2021 Bond Accountability Committee meeting. My name is Kenichi Onyagasi, and I serve as the co-chair of this committee. In the absence of our Tom Peterson, I will be chairing the meeting today. I'm looking forward to robust conversations. The first meeting that we had 2 months ago was great. It was really rich content before and after, and I just want to appreciate the staff for all the follow-up that they provided after that meeting, and also looking forward to the robust conversation that's going to happen at this meeting. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Marina to take us through the agenda.
Thank you, Kenichi. I think it would be great if we could do introductions of our board and BAC members before we go further in. Could we maybe start? I do see that we have Director DePass on the call. Maybe she could start.
Hi, everyone. I'm Director DePass, or better known as Michelle. I'm glad to be here. I'm on the school board.
Thank you. And Kenichi already went, so yeah, I'll pick somebody, and then if you could just pick another BAC member after that, we'll go through that way. Norm, why don't you go next?
Hi, Norm Dowdy. I think I'm on somewhere into my second year on the Bond Advisory Committee, and enjoying learning about the projects. And it's a massive undertaking, and I think everyone's doing a great job. Thank you. Let's go with Dick.
There we go. Okay. Had trouble unmuting myself. Dick Steinbrugge. I'm a committee member, been on the BAC for, gosh, I have to go back and look. I think this must be my third year, and enjoying being part of it and looking forward to this exciting 2020 bond program that we're getting into now. I'll hand it over to Greg.
Thanks, Dick. Greg DiLoretto, BAC member. I'm in my second year on the BAC. And I'll go with, let's see who we got. Let's see, hope I get it right. John, next. At least what I see on my screen.
Do we want to maybe go Beth?
Hi, I'm Beth Woodward. I'm just at the end of my first year on the Bond Accountability Committee. And Kara?
Yeah, hi, Kara Toronto, and I am the very beginning of my first year on the Bond Accountability Committee, and I will call on Karen.
Hi, Karen Weiland. I am on my third year on the Bond Accountability Committee. Dick and I came on at the same time. Thanks.
I think that covers all the BAC members we have. I do see that Director Scott just joined us. Director Scott, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, thanks. Andrew Scott. I'm a board member from Zone 1, and I'm going to be listening in tonight, but off camera because I also need to be making dinner at the same time.
Sounds good. Thank you. I'm Marina Cresswell. I'm the Senior Director of the Office of School Modernization. I will ask my staff to introduce themselves before they present, but we won't go through and do full introductions tonight in the interest of keeping this timely. And the one thing I would like to ask is our communications manager, David Main, have we received any public comment?
No, we have not.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to work our way right into the program. administration updates, and this is just a slide to identify some of the acronyms that you'll see on the update reports. Similar formats. Again, we've been introducing new formats to the Bond Accountability Committee this year. What you see for the program should be pretty much identical to what you saw in March. We will see some changes in the reports for the projects coming up later, and I'll talk about those later, but let's talk a little bit about the program. Equity, the piece at the top, generally speaking, it's up slightly. As a reminder, we show you both cumulative and a 12-month report. Both numbers are up slightly for our totals. Those numbers are based on contract payments. So it's payments received, not total contract values. Those numbers do change.
Marina, may I interrupt? I don't know if there's any way to make this any bigger.
I don't think I can make it any bigger, but within the invite, you should see the link to the materials.
Okay.
And if
just enlarge my screen, but thank you. I'll try looking, following along.
Okay. It's sort of a necessary evil that the information we can provide on the screen is just not very big to begin with, which is one of the reasons why we do send out those attachments ahead of time so that people can see them slightly more easily. And thank you, Brooke. One of our resident tech gurus in OSM has noted that if those of you that are on the call, if you hover over the presentation, you can pin it with what looks like a little thumbtack, and that should make it bigger. So, or as big as it can be. Moving on to budget numbers. 2012 program. No significant changes in the 2012 program budget. We are continuing to forecast in the contingency estimated completion funding that has already been approved for the grant upper field improvements. So if you see 1.4 million there in contingency at the estimated completion, that encompasses a significant chunk of that is actually for the grant upper field improvements. We just have not transferred the funds yet to the project, so I'm still showing that. That funding was approved by the board several months ago. I did add on this report labels with the percentages of contingency. So I'm just trying to provide a little more context on the contingency amounts, the percentage at the start, and the percentage where we are today. And I have changed those contingency graphs so that they all graph the same total value or potential value to make it a little bit easier to look at them across the programs. So if you see some changes from the last time, that's why. Always open to suggestions on how better to share that information. 2017 program. Also no significant changes to the 2017 program. One thing that you might note in there is that the unallocated health and safety funds estimated completion is currently showing roughly 4 million more than the budget. That is simply to show you that we have several projects in health and safety that are returning funds to unallocated. We're just mid-budget transfer, or we were when I pulled the data. So just clarifying that there are additional funds coming back to unallocated. And once they get there, then we will reallocate them to new projects. So it's just a way to kind of identify all the numbers a little more accurately. We are 51% complete with 2017 bond program funds. 2020, what you will see there, you'll see we do have some actuals approved for 2020. That is primarily in technology and curriculum. We are not doing reports out this month on technology and curriculum. You will see those in the next meeting. And the forecasted over under, again, budget transfers are in process for us to put some funding into 2020 roofing projects. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later when we go through the 2017 roofing and the 2020 roofing project updates. Just really quick notes. I'm not going to read these out. I just wanted to do a couple highlights. In general, one of the things that we've been working on quite a bit over the last couple months, last probably 6 months at least, is process improvement. Part of that is because we had a number of really great process improvement recommendations from our last performance audit. But the other part of that is that we brought on a lot of new people. And with growth, it gives us an opportunity to really revisit what, how we do things, how we train people, what the materials are that we're training them on, and how we ensure consistency. And, excuse me, I was just muting David there. And so we've been spending a lot of time going through that simple process improvement. There are a number of different things we're looking at. It's standards for e-builder. It's how we start up new projects. It's all of our onboarding materials. It's our standard operating procedures. We have quite a bit of stuff that we're working through. A lot of it does tie back to audit recommendations, but there's also other things that don't. And just as a note for that, we've never really called this out, I think, with the new team members, but we have an internal audit implementation team that meets on a monthly basis to go through all of our audit recommendations and, you know, identify our progress, figure out how we need to implement things that we haven't, you know, quite nailed down how we're going to implement them, or determine if we've actually implemented the recommendation that was given to us and we can report it as closed. So we have a little bit of process around that too. We're pretty process heavy in OSM, to be honest. Beyond that, just a couple quick notes. I was asked to do an update on the modernizations because we are not doing project updates on all projects every meeting anymore. So I can say the 2017 modernizations remain on schedule and on budget. Madison, formerly known as Madison, now McDaniel High School, that project we've all been kind of watching very carefully because it is a very tight schedule. And as part of not just watching that, but being very proactive about it, we put together a high school transition team that includes representatives from, I mean, I'm going to say this is virtually every department in PPS. That may be exaggerating just a little bit, but it does touch on all of the leadership areas and many, many staff level folks as well. The intent of that team is for everybody to get together to talk through the transitions that will be occurring this summer as we move McDaniel High School out of the Marshall campus and back to their new buildings, and we move Benson High School and MPG and the various programs involved there out of their campus to Marshall to Kenton. So there's a lot of moving parts and pieces. They impact so many different areas within PPS. We found that this is a very useful way for us to ensure that everybody's on the same page and that we're all coordinating with each other and we're not stepping on toes and we're not doing things that are going to have unintended consequences for other folks as we do this very tight dance, getting people in and out. 2020 bond scope of work. Just a quick note: we are moving forward with, what we loosely call low-hanging fruit. This was intentional as we put together the bond package, that there would be some things that we would move forward with right away. However, we're also developing implementation plans for all of the infrastructure scopes. Those implementation plans are intended to lay out draft criteria for selection and prioritization of projects in each of the categories. They will be going forward to the School Improvement Bond Committee. We currently have scheduled to discuss draft implementation plans for ADA sped and roof scopes at the School Improvement Bond Committee meeting in late June, potentially early July. I think that the date, there may be some flux on the date there. And we are going to be talking a little bit about capacity at the meeting tomorrow, but it's not going to be a full implementation plan. Beyond that, we have not scheduled implementation plans, but we will be looking to schedule those over the course of 2021 so that we can get those out to the board. We do continue to refine all of our setups and processes with the 2021 as well. And that is it for planned presentation. Available for questions before we move on to the next item on the agenda. Beth?
Yes, when you said bond committee, did you mean this committee, bond accountability committee, that get to see the draft criteria for the infrastructure scopes?
It's the School Improvement Bond Committee, which is a subcommittee of the board. It is made up of 3 board members, including Chair Director DePass. It also has Director Scott and Director Constam on it.
I think that criteria is really significant to understand. I spent time searching for it for the construction contracts. I couldn't find criteria like design life, for example. And I know you may be talking about something different kinds of criteria for the 2020 bond, but nonetheless, I'd be very interested as a back member in knowing what that draft criteria is when it's draft, when there's a chance to perhaps comment on it, depending on what it is.
Absolutely, and we're happy to share the draft implementation plans. I'm going to leave this very open because Director DePass is here, but it almost feels like it would be ideal if BAC members that want to weigh in could attend the SIBC meeting, as opposed to us trying to do it twice in 2 different forums. And so I'm going to kind of leave that open because I don't manage the SIBC meetings, and so I'll let Dan Young and Director DePass maybe weigh in on that.
Yeah, and I was going to say, unfortunately we're having, or maybe fortunately, we're actually scheduled to have a School Improvement Bond Committee tomorrow, which is short notice for most people. But if it helps, we could share out the regular meeting schedule and the agendas ahead of time. I don't know if that makes it easier for you to attend. I know people don't just love attending meetings for no reason, but if that would help, so the agenda and you know what's on the agenda. And I'm open to suggestion too, and maybe Dan has some info he could share too. But we meet every month. I believe we're on an every month schedule, and I'm happy to share that out and invite BAC members.
That'd be great, and be able to, if it works out. Thank you.
Yeah, nothing to add from me. I just sharing the schedule. Happy to do that, and very easy to do.
Thank you. We are not going over any draft criteria or draft implementation plans tomorrow's meeting, but the next one we will be. And the criteria that we're discussing are really, to put it in different terms, it is our determining the methodology through which we actually select projects to be done with the funding and in what order we do those projects. So it is how do we know what we're selecting, and how do we know what we're going to do first? And those are the criteria that we're looking to lay out. Norm?
I just wanted to ask how the recruiting and hiring is going for the 2020 bond projects, getting them staffed up.
I think we had a good initial push. We have brought on some new project managers. You're going to meet at least one of them tonight, potentially one of the others. We do still have open recruitments. We are doing a rolling recruitment for our mid-level project managers. In particular, we still need to do some staffing for the security scope of work. And we are still looking at staffing for Jefferson and the Center for Black Student Excellence. Beyond that, we did bring on staff who are working on 2020 roof and mechanical scope. And we brought on staff for the 2020 ADA and SPED scope.
Okay. Yeah, I know it's still a pretty tight market out there. So great.
We had great interest initially. We're not seeing as much now, but we're going back out with more advertisements to try and just kind of remind people that the recruitment is still open. And just to put a plug in, we also have a recruitment right now for senior accountants. So if there's anybody watching who is interested in working with a great group of people, please come check our website because we have that open as well. And thanks for allowing me to do that, Norm. Okay, any other questions on the program? All right, so our next agenda item is the year 4 draft work plan from our performance auditors. And so I am actually going to turn this over to SEC. I'm going to let them do their own introductions because I never say their names correctly.
Thanks, Marina, and good afternoon or evening, everyone. My name is Kathy Brady, and I'm so pleased to be here today with Leanne Liu from our firm, which is a mouthful, Schoberg Eva Schenk Consulting. And we are here today to talk to you about the year 4 performance audit of the 2017 and 2020 bond. What I thought we'd do first is, just for the benefit of the newer subcommittee members, is a quick background on these bond audits. Our firm was hired by PPS in October of 2018 to conduct these annual performance audits for the 2017 bond and projects for at least a 4-year audit cycle. This is our 4th year already in that cycle. We've issued 3 reports thus far and are working on the 3rd year audit report as we speak. The first year had 2 reports, so on all total, when we're done, there'll be 5 audit reports. Before Leanne gets to the audit scope for year 4, I'll also give a quick introduction for our firm. Again, the mouthful of Schoberg Eva Schenk Consulting. We were founded more than 21 years ago by the former California State Auditor, and we specialize solely in public sector audits and consulting, primarily in the Western United States. Over the years, we've conducted many audits of different government sectors, but we have a lot of experience with K-12 schools and school districts, departments of education, as well as at the community college and university level. And in addition, we have extensive experience with capital project delivery and management, construction financing, and bond-funded projects. Our contract with PPS requires something that we embrace. It's generally accepted government auditing standards. It's known as GAGAS, or Yellow Book Standards, because it comes in a book with a yellow cover. So that's what us auditors refer to it as. The standards provide a great framework to help us ensure objectivity, integrity, and quality in our audits. And they set forth a variety of requirements that we must follow related to areas such as independence and ethics, how we plan and supervise the audit work, and how we gather sufficient evidence to support our results, among many other provisions. To us, the evidence standard is one of the more important features of GAGAS because our conclusions have to be based on evidence, such as testing of data or observations and analysis. It can't just be on our opinion or on our years of experience in a particular area. It has to be on evidence. This also impacts the auditees because we ask for a lot of documentation from them. And we ask lots of questions and follow-up questions that requires even more documentation and evidence from them. Another important part of the standards that impacts PPS relates to the requirement that we have to obtain and use of responsible officials in our reports. So this ensures that PPS perspective is included, both through written response to our formal reports, which gets attached in our reports, as well as through informal briefings that we hold throughout the audit to discuss developing issues and recommendations as we're finding things. So we use this standard for the PPS bond audits, and for each year we develop an audit scope for that particular annual cycle that results in the work plan that we're here today to discuss. So to develop that scope, we employ several steps. We interview OSM management staff. We could talk to PPS executive leadership. We sometimes can talk to the external construction professionals that are used, other stakeholders. And we're trying to gather perspective, understand what's going on currently with the environment, what risk areas are popping up or concerns or challenges. So we try to get as much perspective as we can to inform our work plan. We also look at some data, just preliminary data through eBuilder. We have access to the eBuilder project management system that OSM uses, and we look at project files. We might look through some meeting notes, project status reports if something's falling behind, going over budget. We might look at contracts, board meeting minutes, and status on the audit recommendations that we've made in the past. And then we use those to inform a high-level risk assessment and consider factors that help us decide what potential areas to audit. Might be some prior audit issues that are unresolved, or there might be huge program or practice changes, or a new bond that comes into play with different areas. There might be things going on in the industry that we want to see how that's affecting the work at PPS. There might be turnover or leadership changes. So we use that to do a risk assessment. And then we draft an initial work plan. We meet with OSM to talk through it, what makes sense to look at. For instance, we wouldn't want to look at construction management if a project's just in the design phase. So we have that check, a little vetting with OSM as well as the BAC here today to refine or add or refocus the audit areas before we finalize the plan. So before, or I guess probably now's a good time to talk about specifics for the 2021 audit scope. So I'll turn it over to Leanne to go through the details with you.
Thank you, Kathy. Good evening, members of the BAC. Before I go into details, I just wanted to mention how the audit focus areas have evolved from us looking at how the 2017 bond budgets were estimated in year one to diving deeper into the CMGC project delivery method in year two, and now assessing business equity in year three. We know that relevant, real-time, and implementable recommendations are important to OSM and us, and therefore we try to tailor our work to current bond events so that potential issues could be immediately addressed. So what we have set as our scope for year four is definitely our largest body of work thus far, but we believe the work is timely and can set the stage for future audit work, especially as it relates to the 2020 bond. So what I will be sharing with you today are what we call big audit questions that help us focus our work. With a program this large, it is easy to get buried in the weeds, and so working towards answering these key questions help us focus as we are going through all of our analyses. So for the first area, we will be looking at the status of the 2017 bond. This is a recurring focus area for each year because it is important to provide the public with an independent assessment of where the bond program stands in terms of delivering what has been promised. What is a little different though this time is that we will look at practices in place to prepare for the construction closeout of Kellogg and McDaniel, and if there are any lessons learned from the closeout of the 2020 bond projects, 2012 bond projects, that should be considered. The second scope item relates to contractor workforce equity. You may know that there are 3 components to PPS's equity in public purchasing and contracting policy. First, business equity, then contractor workforce, and then career learning. The business equity aspect is covered as part of our current year 3 audit. So for year 4, we will look specifically at contractor workforce and how efficient and effective OSM and other PPS departments are in terms of ensuring provisions are met by contractors. The third area relates to performance measurement. This is not only looking at any performance measurement system in place, but also assessing how and if OSM is using performance outcomes or results to improve bond program processes and practices. The fourth audit area is really a first look from an audit perspective at the 2020 bond. We are still focusing on the delivery of the 2017 bond, but with the 2020 bond starting, it is important to assess any risks that could negatively impact the delivery. And so this audit risk assessment will cast a wide net and sort of catalog, if you will, all the areas that are touched by the bond, along with determining risk, controls, and mitigating factors. The fifth area is somewhat an expansion of the risk assessment and will provide a closer look at how the 2020 bond is functioning. Unlike prior bonds, there are more PPS departments involved than just OSM, so we really wanted to get an understanding on who is doing what, such as planning and budgeting and prioritizing improvements, and how all components are managed and overseen. The last item is prior audit recommendations. And while it is important for us to validate any progress made by OSM and PPS towards addressing past recommendations, I also wanted to say that over the last few audits, we found that OSM takes our recommendations seriously and is looking at implementing every one of them. And so we are anticipating this area to be a smaller focus, and maybe at some point in the future, there won't be any recommendations for us to follow up on at all. In terms of timeline, the dates that you see here are still very much preliminary and are dependent on when we can kick off year 4. The goal is still to have a draft report before the end of fiscal year 2022, and then there is just this longer tail with exit conferences, finalizing the report and presentations to you and a board committee. But that is all that we have with regard to the year 4 audit work plan, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Go ahead, Brady.
This is great. So you said in the 2020, we'll look at the risks. So can you give me an example of what you mean by risks? So if you can give me an example of what you mean by that.
Let me go back. Yes, so, as part of any audit project that we're starting, we did that for the 2017 bond too. We would look at all of the areas that are touched by the bond, mainly expenditures and who is involved, and kind of look at what would be some of the areas that could impact the delivery of the program, whether it is related to, cost control, schedule control, managing the program overall, what policies and processes are in place to make sure that there are no weaknesses or specific items that could impact the program. So at this point, it would be really, the risk would be identified as part of what I would call our reconnaissance phase, as we're starting to look at all the areas that are covered by the bond. And then it could be, like I said, risk related to payments, contractor payments, risks related to just like Marina mentioned, how are they prioritizing work? What are the factors that are being considered? Risks related to the construction market, will they have enough contractors? And so forth. So there could be a variety of things, but it's basically all areas that are touched by the bonds, and we'll evaluate those.
Okay, so you might look at things like whether materials are available, whether people are available. That's a risk to the project, for example.
It could be, but you know, we are not quite there yet. So it will be you know, casting really a wide net to look at everything and then determine and ranking those risk areas, because there might be things that would be higher risk that we will look at earlier on in, you know, next year, and something that is considered medium or lower risk might be something that could be done by the construction auditor or a future year audit.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I think that was a great, following on Greg's question. Are you assessing risks to the project being done at all? Or are you also looking at the risk? I mean, you know, when you pass a bond, you promise the voters a package of, you know, deliverables. Are you looking at the risk to those deliverables? Or those a risk that that projects for whatever reason aren't completable, or it sounds like there's like a performance risk. Are you also looking at financial risks?
I think yes. It really, anything in a nutshell would be anything that would impact the delivery on the promises that were made to voters, right? So if you're saying you were, say for the 2017 bond, you were saying you were, PBS was saying they were going to do 4 schools and they're going to spend $150 million on health and safety. As part of looking at that, you know, in year 1 especially, where there were the funding challenges. So that was a, if you will, a financial risk that could have prohibited some projects from getting done. So, you know, as part of that, we were looking at cost estimating practices. How did that all come about? And, you know, I'm not sure if that will be something that we'll be looking at for the 2020 bond. But it is both, it's financial, but then also actual delivery and impacts of those sort of constraints of the program in the environment.
Thank you.
Other questions? Comments? I'm not seeing any hands or anything.
I'm not either. I guess one question I would ask is, if there are topics that you think the performance auditor should be reviewing, as opposed to, is this a good set of topics? Maybe the other question is, are there others that you think they should be reviewing? And maybe it's not this year, but it's something that comes in a later year.
And Marina, would you mind clarifying how, if someone were to have a brilliant idea, that's something that should be looked at, how would they get that information into the right hands?
Well, obviously the easiest way to do that is to send it to me, and I will send it to the auditors. But we also are happy to share their contact information directly if you would like to send brilliant ideas to them directly. And I do see Kenichi, I believe, raised a hand.
Yes, I did. I wanted to add that one area that might be interesting to look at is the contractor availability for the DMWSB pool, with all the other projects that are going to be rolling out in our region here over the next 24 to 36 months. If there's going to be sufficient firms to meet whatever goals have been set, and the workforce. That's something that I know other agencies are taking a look at, and is helping kind of drive the conversation around what goals should be set. But there's a lot of infrastructure that's going to be happening in our region here pretty quickly, and it'd be interesting to see how that impacts PPS projects.
I also wanted to add that we always, as part of our beginning reconnaissance phase, we always extend invitations to all PPS board members and BAC members to have a sit-down interview with us before we go very deep into field work, to sort of hear your concerns, questions and whatnot. So we'll be doing the same early on when we're starting year 4 to offer those one-on-ones with the BAC as well as the board. Okay, if there's nothing else, then I will turn it back over to Marina. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Kathy and Leanne, both of you, and of course to your staff who are not present on this call but do a lot of hard work as part of the audits.
Thank you.
Go ahead and resume presenting here. And we will move on to the next topic, which is the 2017 health and safety updates. Just to give a quick overview for as a refresher for our existing members and more information for our new members, the 2017 bond had $150 million set aside for health and safety improvements. They were called out for 8 specific categories. We sometimes confuse people by calling them programs, which, of course, we have the bond program itself, but then we have these health and safety programs. If I slip up and say program instead of category, just understand I mean it as those 8 categories that were set aside. The bond measure itself did not set aside specific dollar amounts for each of the categories. It simply provided the categories. So after the measure was passed, dollar amounts were allocated to each category, and that is what you will see for the totals. I did provide the same health and safety project report that we have provided in the past in your packets. So it is the same report that you've seen previously. You're going to see a lot of the same information tonight on these category reports or program reports, just in a slightly different format, but it is the same information. You should be able to kind of tie it back to that full health and safety program report. And I also wanted to point out before we get too far into these, we do have a significant amount of information on our web pages for each of the different categories of health and safety. If you come to a web page that is not fully current, understand that we are working through all of those different web pages to make sure that they are up to date, and we hope to be there soon. I will also say that on our main page for the bond, we do have an interactive map that you can go and look to see which projects have been completed at which schools. That's a great way to see the health and safety projects, because one aspect of the 2017 health and safety program is that we have touched every school in the district multiple times with different scopes of work and different buckets of funding from the health and safety allocation. So there's a lot of information there that you can see on the different sites and what's been done. We are going to, I'm going to show you, this is the same slide that we showed earlier, same information about how we get to different status colors, if you will, and also our acronyms that we use on some of the reports. But before we get too far into our first report, I do want to walk you through just a couple things that are different from these reports versus the ones you saw 2 months ago. So with our modernizations, one big project with these health and safety categories, lots of projects. And we're not going to give you an individual project sheet for every project because you'd spend days leafing through it. So what we did is we created a multiple project update that allows you to see every project as it's laid out in any builder. So this is how we show these and how we manage these. Each of these will show all the projects that are under that funding category. They will show the fund amounts specific to that category. I say that very intentionally because we have some projects that use funding from multiple categories. So you may see that project show up on multiple sheets, and you may see it with different amounts. That's because it does use funding from different categories, and these are specific to the category. You should be able to see which projects are closed versus active. So if it's completed, we've tried to gray it out, put a little X, make it easy for you to see what we're actually working on right now. And in the schedules, when you look at the schedules, because our health and safety projects typically occur on a much shorter duration, they're not taking 3 years like a modernization might. They're a matter of months. And so we have shown the schedules as a month breakout, just to give you a little more granularity into the projects, and each of the projects is shown as well. With that, I am going to, one more thing I realized I forgot. For this report out for health and safety, we did not provide you equity breakdowns by health and safety category. It's not because we didn't want to. We absolutely do want to. However, our data that we have collected over the years for all of our health and safety projects currently does not break out by health and safety categories or by projects. It's broken out by contract. And I had great thoughts that we were going to be able to touch each of those contracts and identify which category it goes into and pull it all together into nice, neat and tidy numbers. I vastly underestimated how many contracts we had that needed to be touched to do that. So we are working through that. The next time we report out on the health and safety categories, you will get an equity breakdown by category. It will not be by project, it will be by category. So I just wanted to be clear about that. For the most part, I left that blank in the red, green, blue at the top. So there shouldn't be anything in the equity section, but it's coming. Okay. And then I will go ahead and turn this over to our first category, which is lead paint. And again, just a reminder to my staff, if they can introduce themselves before they start their presentation. Go ahead, Chris.
Hey, thank you. My name is Chris Boyce. I'm overseeing the paint stabilization project for the 2017 bond. First, I just want to say kudos, 620 on the nose. Perfect. I just want to start with the status at a glance page for the paint stabilization. A little bit of a caveat. It's kind of a unique project because we're bouncing from site to site to site throughout this project. So you'll see that it looks like it's showing there are 5 active projects. The top line there with a current budget of $10 million of multi-site. That's kind of the umbrella project for our in-house staff that is doing work, and in-house paint crew, as well as just a lot of other incidentals tied to the program in general. And then the lower 4 projects that are in white there are basically 4 contractors that are under an IDIQ contract that are going to help us with projects throughout the district. So we're moving money into those projects, as contractors win bids under the IDIQ contracting. Similarly, under the schedule, you'll see pretty much everything is listed as active as in construction. That's because, unlike other projects, we don't have planning and design work like some of the modernization or other programs. It's basically just all right into addressing the paint. So with that update,
Chris, do we want to
yes.
go ahead?
I'm gonna. I have a quick question also about IDIQ.
Sorry.
Spell out the acronym, not spell it out, but
Oh, I'm sorry. Indefinite duration, indefinite quantity. So basically, it's kind similar to master contract for contractors that we go through a bidding process and then we award to multiple contractors. And then once they're under contract, as projects come out, we can dole them out as basically like job orders to the low bidder from that pool of 4 contractors.
Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, so Chris, on these lead paint projects, do you have to paint the entire building inside? I mean, you don't pick a room and do one room.
Yeah, no, and I will definitely get into that.
Okay.
I just kind of want to do a little summary of this status update page first. And if there aren't questions on that, I will dive into the kind of history and details a little bit. And hopefully that answers your questions. So thank you for the lead in there. That was perfect. The history of this is right before the bond was passed, there were lead paint inspections or paint deterioration assessments done on all district properties. Those were done by lead risk assessors. Every single property was assessed interior and exterior, and that was looking for deteriorated paint, impact to paint, peeling, flaking, age deterioration, as well as paint chips and dust present at schools. Those assessments were used to develop a budget for the lead paint program, the stabilization program. And then those reports were also used to develop a priority ranking that was done by a predecessor of mine that basically looked at what square footage of deterioration was noted and how did that compare to the total square footage of the footprint of the building. Not an exact science, but just needed a way to kind of develop a priority ranking. And then that was separated out by the interior and by the exterior of the building. When I came on board, the in-house paint crew, there's an in-house paint crew of 5 painters. It's gone from 4 to 6, now to 5. They were doing whole building interiors, and which was great for those buildings, but we recognized that we were only going to be able to get through, a couple buildings or a few buildings a year if we're doing the entire interior. And what I was worried about was we're going to run out of money painting the interior of one building while there was still severe chipping or peeling in a kindergarten classroom where kids were sitting on a reading circle carpet or something. So we developed a phased approach where we're going to look at the interior locations where the youngest, most at-risk children are present first and address those locations throughout the district, whether it was one daycare program in a high school or all of the pre-K through 2nd grade classrooms in an elementary school building. So to answer your question, no, we're not doing entire buildings at a time. We're doing a phased approach where we really where we felt we were really addressing the risk and prioritizing the most at risk first. That first phase of work was completed, I believe, spring of 2020. And now we're moving on to additional locations on the exterior and interiors of the building, where maybe not those locations where the youngest kids are, but in pre-K or K-5 buildings or K-8 buildings. So again, where the younger children are present, but more of an expanded scope throughout the building is what we're currently working on. And that is also expanded out into the exteriors of the building. We're trying to do some of those at the same time because in Oregon, we're not blessed with, a 4 or 5 month, exterior painting window where, we have a few months where we might have some nice days, during a week. So we try to do some interior and have a scope for exterior at the same time going on. All of that work pretty much I'm talking about to date was pretty much done by the in-house paint crew that we have operating their OSM employees. Office of School Modernization employees that are a paint crew, and they kind of work in synthesis under the maintenance department at the district. As we're progressing, you are getting through those phases of work where the smallest or youngest children are present. We're actually now starting to dive into more involved, larger scale projects as well. And that's where the contractors under the IDIQ contract are now being utilized. This coming summer, we're going to be painting the full exterior of 2 buildings because in some of those cases, it really did warrant a full exterior paint, all the exterior trim was peeling or flaking, or just deterioration enough to the point where it warranted, full painting. And that's something that, a 5-person in-house crew, couldn't tackle, in a summer. So those are the type of projects where we're utilizing the 4 contractors we have on board. In addition to those large projects, we're also branching out into some other areas that are going to need some more planning. We've been doing a pilot project where we're painting lockers throughout buildings and working with some suppliers to look at products that really can withstand the test of time for some of those lockers. There are some in buildings that the interiors of the lockers have never been painted since they were originally installed. And so there's some, deterioration and chalking occurring. And then we're also looking at some other difficult areas like mechanical spaces and boiler rooms, which obviously is not where students are going to be present, but it can present a risk because of people moving supplies, moving cleaning carts in and out of custodial storage rooms, having this custodian or maintenance staff walking through boiler rooms and potentially carrying dust, on their feet through the building. So we're looking at how to address those areas because they're, sometimes these boiler rooms are 2-story buildings that are filled with a cobweb of conduits and pipes and boilers. And, how do we get to that peeling and flaking paint? So we're starting to address some of those challenges along the way. We're also looking to do some more coordination with other bond projects. I don't want to go in and paint a classroom that's going to have an exterior wall ripped out as part of a seismic upgrade. I don't want to address a boiler room that's going to have all the mechanical systems possibly pulled out in the coming years. So we're trying to coordinate that, coordinate painting with what makes sense with other projects as well. A couple of the challenges we're having are those new, larger kind of projects and boiler room mechanical areas. But then something else we're seeing that's interesting is now we've been through, I believe it is 75 buildings in the district, 75 schools. Some of those we've been through twice now because we've done the interior work and then we came back and did more exterior and interior work. And it gives us the opportunity to look at the work that was done a couple of years ago, but now we're also seeing new damage. So, one of the old adages with painting and lead work is, you paint a bridge and then when you get done with it and you get to the other side, you basically turn around and start working back. So we're kind of in that stage where we're starting to work back again. And in some cases, we're doing new areas, but we're also touching up things that were actually done a couple of years ago. So we're looking at how to better, maybe expand our scope a little bit and address those areas and create a little bit more of a permanent solution rather than just slapping on a ceiling primer or paint that maybe addresses the deterioration, but isn't a long-term fix. Some of the real successes we have is the in-house paint crew. I really have to sing their praises. They've done a great job. One thing that's really nice about an in-house paint crew is they are district staff. They walk in, they talk to the principal, they talk to custodians, talk to teachers, and they really develop, a bond and say, they're very flexible. They can work with teachers. This crew works swing shifts. So if they're working in like a, 4th grade classroom, they're pulling things off the shelves. They're priming those shelves, prepping the work area, painting the shelves, getting it dry, putting things back so that those teachers and students can show up the next morning and teach and not be interrupted. So that's something that would be really difficult to do with a contractor. So the in-house staff, their coordination and communication with the staff in the building has been phenomenal, has really helped the success of this project. And I think just in general, them being willing to also help out with some of those pilot projects I've talked about. They've been really interested in seeing what works and really interested in coming up with a plan for things like lockers and boiler rooms, something that really does truly work for the long-term solution to some of these issues.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
Dick, you've had your hand raised.
Yeah, yes, thank you. Chris, I actually had a question back on the budget table.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to be sure I'm reading this correctly. First, I think I've forgotten the difference between committed and actuals to date. So perhaps you could re-inform me about that. But it appears that we're about $2 million executed out of a $16 million budget. Is that right?
2 million. that's where it definitely gets tricky. For example, those 4 projects down at the bottom that are all listed as multi-sites, that's basically right now, the estimate at completion is just a placeholder amount that, you know, may be spent for each of those 4 contractors. So that is, we're estimating about $6 million will go to those 4 contractors. It probably won't be, you know, neatly bundled up as, you know, 1.5 million each. So,
yeah, my question was more about progress to date based on expenditures, I guess.
Oh, okay.
And I'm thinking, you know, we're almost 4 years into the 2017 program, and it seems like we're only for probably a lot of good reasons, scratching the surface. Maybe that's a little unfair on this part of the program. Is there a forecast on when it'll be completed?
The forecast for this project, I think we originally stretched out over 3 years. But sorry, that wasn't from the original beginning of the bond, though. I don't want to throw this back to you, Marina, but I'm wondering if you can help me speak to that a little bit because of how we separated this out into the 4 IDIQ projects. But maybe before I send it your way, I will speak to, yes, that is definitely fair, because I think some of the smaller projects we've been doing, it has kind of been a hunt and peck painting projects as we've been trying to do those, what I call phase 1 work in the elementary schools. And now that we are diving into things like full scale exteriors, I think, you know, that will all of a sudden speed up on us, and we will be, you know, spending quite a bit more money as we dive into those bigger projects.
Yeah, I think we've always anticipated that the large dollar amounts that will go out to contractors. We did attempt to bring contractors on earlier.
Yeah.
It was a failed attempt at the time. We weren't able to get the interest that we needed to do that. So we moved forward with our in-house painting crew and, you know, sort of expanded the crew a little bit more than we anticipated initially in order to keep working on the materials that needed to be worked on, with the intent of going back out and getting these contracts in place. So, you know, I will say we're happy the contracts are in place. We do expect that the expenditure rate will go up significantly as we start, you know, sending out those different packages of work to the contractors. But it is a fair criticism. I think it had a slow start, absolutely. But we do also see it speeding up.
Yeah, thank you. And that's a really good point. I kind of blocked out that failed IDIQ process that went through and didn't get any bidders. So that definitely delayed things.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Greg.
Well, I wanted to follow up on Dick's question about committed versus actual, because I too have forgotten what's the difference and what does it mean? So on your you got it here too, so you can address it in this one. You've got Capitol Hill, you've got a budget of 113,000, you've committed 55,000, but you've spent 90,000. Estimate to complete at 103,000. None of those add up, so maybe they're not supposed to.
They're not, and I think one of the things that I think that's a failure of these reports. When I was putting these together, as again, you know, these are new this year, and we sort of realized there's going to be some tweaking along the way. I think it would actually be more helpful if I could give you the, how do I say it? The remaining committed. So committed are encumbrances. There are contracts. They're the things that we've promised to spend. These don't necessarily add up. So there's some tweaking to be done on it. I would say for now, great data, not so useful. Let's fix it and make it better next time.
You have a bunch of engineers that are trying to add this up so you can understand.
I know. We're going to ban engineers from this committee from here on out. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to Glenn. And Glenn, if you could introduce yourself before you start in. And you're on mute, Glenn.
Hello, everybody. I am Glenn Bryant, managing the health and safety asbestos projects for the bond work. I've been with the district since 2018, and there have been about 19 projects of various sizes and scopes over various schools, dealing with flooring, asbestos piping, crawl spaces, and other things of that nature that need the attention for the mitigation of the asbestos risk. Those scopes of works are prioritized by past survey data. Sometimes maintenance personnel have good input on that, as well as the facilities management team. And the impact to the school also has a bearing on the size and the scope of the projects. To date, we're planning about 8 projects for
Glenn, you muted again.
Okay, when did I mute out? Anyway, the present scope of work we have is 8 schools, and all the projects vary in size, and they also go after the higher risk asbestos that's accessible to students mainly there, and take in the condition of the materials. As you can see from the chart there, it's pretty self-explanatory. It looks like we had a current budget of 12, or original budget of 12 million. Looks like we're down to around 5 million for the remainder of the work. And once we get all the bids and the estimates in, then we'll be starting up the projects for this year. That's how I highlight everything. Any questions on that?
Go ahead, Dick.
Thank you. So am I reading the chart correctly that the forecast is you will finish all of the requirements with $5.8 million left over?
Oh, I think I see what you're saying. There was no set scope of work. It's just being developed as we meet with all the stakeholders and risk management.
What does the 5.8 million mean then?
So that's the funding. If I could step in here, Glenn, the 5.3 looks like an 8, doesn't it? The 5.3 is what is currently unallocated funding. It has not been allocated out to specific projects yet. That doesn't mean it won't be. It just means it hasn't been yet. All of the health and safety categories are what we call spend up funds. So we have money that we intend to spend every last drop of it on those health and safety projects. Similar to what I was talking about with defining the criteria for selecting and prioritizing projects for 2020, we also have criteria for the 2017 projects. And with asbestos, we didn't come in 2017 and say, here's a list of all the sites and all the scopes that we're going to do, and we're going to do it for this amount of money. We said, here are the criteria for us to select projects because we have far more potential projects than we have funding. So we will go through and we'll knock them off one by one based on that criteria until we use up all of our funding. So what you see here is all the funding that's been allocated to date, and the amount of funding that's left that's not yet allocated, but will be moving forward. And I think it's important to note too that we're not showing on here yet the projects that will be taking place this summer, in large part because we're still getting bids in on those sites. And we've found that if we give a list of projects out and then we don't get bids for some reason, we get a lot of unhappy people. So we like to wait until we have our bids in, and then we can announce the sites. But we will say that we're out there bidding 8 sites right now, with the hopes that we'll have good numbers, good bids coming back for all 8 of those to get them done this summer. And then we'll start the process again with scoping, design, bidding, and construction next summer. And we just keep doing that until the funding is used up. Does that clarify the question?
That helps me understand what you're doing. I'm not sure the chart is very useful.
What would you like it to show?
Well, maybe that's a conversation for another time right now. Let's just keep going.
Okay. For Radon, I'm going to ask Darren Lee to talk through this one.
Hello, I am Darren Lee, Director of Construction under Marina for OSM. Radon was started in 2017 bond. We borrowed a project manager from FAM, Teresa Fagan, who did a great job in getting this started with our risk department. Not a whole lot to talk about. We had done testing across all our sites. Radon is governed by regulations through EPA and Oregon Health Division. Out of all the sites we tested, we completed mitigation projects at 17 of them. And moving forward, it's a very slow progression. We're only required to test those sites that we completed our mitigation systems in every 5 years, and then every 10 years other sites. So risk isn't, we're combined with risk on this one. Risk does the testing and follows the all the regulatory protocol. We're up to date. We have about 877,000 left, so more than enough to handle anything that we see. If anything tests positive, we even need to install an additional system or 2 in, over the next several years. So I can add a note that all of our new modernizations, we are requiring the contractor install radon mitigation systems. So anything moving forward on our new project since we started 2017 bond and a lot of 2012 bond have those systems, active systems designed into the project. So really right now it's just a maintenance process to continue our mandatory testing, and we have enough funds there to cover whatever comes up in the future.
So you have funds left over, whatever comes up in the future, but, and Dan, you have a 2017 bond issue. You have so many years to spend the bonds before you run into arbitrage. So you can't just hold them there forever, nope. Right? You might use them on something else, but you'll always, I guess, have money from someplace to do projects. Is that what I'm hearing?
So the money that's set aside for radon will be like any of our other health and safety categories where we've essentially completed the scope that we set out to complete. And we don't need all of the funding that has been set aside. All of that kind of goes back into what we call the unallocated health and safety, right? So the intent is to spend the full $150 million on health and safety projects. It's just that we may not need to spend it on radon. We may be able to spend it instead on asbestos, right? So that's a discussion that's still kind of sitting in the future right now for radon. We're watching it, but we have not come to a point where we're ready to say, yeah, let's figure out what we want to do with this.
Any other questions for Radon?
All right. We will move to Steve for water quality. Steve, if you could introduce yourself. And also let me know when you want me to change slides.
Sure.
Thanks.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Stephen Barblow. I'm project manager of the 2017 Bond Water Quality Project. I've been working on this project for nearly 4 years now. Just to kind of give you guys an update with new members and such, I'm going to kind of just go through a quick update about what we've done already in this project and what has gotten us to this point. So in 2016, all of the Portland Public Schools drinking water was shut off due to elevated lead levels in some of the fixtures. In 2017-18, fixture replacement occurred where we replaced the fixtures in the common areas of the schools, so like the hallways, the gyms, the cafeterias. We tested those and turned on what was above the PPS action level of 15 parts per billion of lead. This process allowed us to bring about 75 to 80% of the fixtures back online. Although some of those fixtures, all those fixtures that we brought on had anywhere between 0 and 15 parts per billion of lead. In the fall of 2018, our team had to develop a plan to bring the remaining 20 to 25% of the fixtures back to service. At the same time, there was a push from within the district and also some outside agencies to reduce the lead level from the 15 parts per billion to as low as possible. The original plan to bring those fixtures back online was through partial pipe replacement. Although through this process, it would not necessarily guarantee that we would hit even the 15 parts per billion, let alone as low as possible. And it also wouldn't necessarily impact the fixtures that had already been turned on. So our team actually developed a filtered drinking water program where all the drinking water at Portland Public Schools would be filtered using point of use filters. And then we had a program goal of 1 part per billion of lead average at every school. And this is 15 times lower than the state required level. And this is to provide students and staff with the best possible water. This plan was tested at 6 schools. It's known as our pilot program over the 2019-2020 school year. And we continuously tested the lead and monitored water usage at these schools. The test was used to kind of determine the successfulness of filtering over an entire school year and also how those filters performed and to see how staff and students responded to the new fixtures. The test was extremely successful, and the average lead level for those pilot schools was 0.4 parts per billion of lead. So in February of 2020, we presented this to the school board, and we're directed to roll it out district-wide. And so that's where we are today. We're incorporating these fixtures into all Portland Public Schools.
Steve, thank you for that. This is Michelle, board member Michelle. I have a question about the pilot schools.
Yes.
How are those determined, and are those equally distributed in different parts of the city, or was it determined by age of building, or what was your decision-making criteria?
So we chose the 6 schools. One, we wanted to choose schools that had all levels. So we had a high school was Jefferson High School. We had 3 elementary schools. We had a middle school, and then we also had a K-8. Okay. So we chose them based on wanting to test these fixtures amongst kind of the entire that the school district has.
The building,
and then
another sounds like it was 1 K-8, 3 elementaries, a middle school, and a high school.
That's correct. Yes.
And then were they geographically distributed? Was that a consideration, or socioeconomic status?
Actually, the way we chose them is we actually looked at some of the worst producing schools in terms of our test levels prior to filtering, because we wanted to really test these filters, make sure, if these worked well in some of our worst case scenarios, then we know that they would work well in all the rest of the schools. So the schools were actually based on testing levels prior to filtering.
Water testing, not academic. I was
That's
thinking
correct.
like
Yes, water testing
might be, if there were, that would be a great criteria to use if the pilot were bigger, looking at test scores, and because test scores are correlated with water quality, or I should say lead. But anyway, thank you. That answered my question. I appreciate it.
So then I want to take a look at our statuses, and the first one is the budget, and the budget is actually strong for the water quality program. We started with $28.5 million from the bond, and after completing the fixture replacement and the filtered drinking water program, it's estimated that we'll have about at least $10 million to return to other health and safety programs. It's still early in the construction program, but after 17 of the 20 projects have bid, if we include the winning bid with a 10% contingency, we've come in at about 78% of our estimate. And after the first 2 bid packages have been substantially complete, that's about 10 school sites. One of the projects used only about 8% of their contingency, and the other one was used only about 5%. So granted, it's a small sample of 10 sites, but we haven't seen real significant overages in those projects. And if you wanted to look at the budget real quick, just to try to head off some possible questions, the estimate at completion is probably the best column to look at in terms of our overall budget. That's looking at contracts that are already in place and then estimates for future projects. We still do have another few costs like testing that needs to be added in here, and another engineering package, but basically this is probably our best column to look at. And then if you look at the over-under, we still have a significant amount of money left over, which we're estimating hopefully at least $10 million that we can return to health and safety projects. I wanted to also mention the equity column that's been checked as yellow. That was unfortunately the default color that hasn't been changed, as we don't have any numbers computed for health and safety projects, as Marina had discussed earlier. And then the last section would be schedule. And if you want to move on, yep. So this has been the biggest issue with this project. When we installed the pilot schools back in the summer of 2019, the LK drinking fountain, which is our the workhorse of this project, it's a high-low bubbler with a bottle filler. Vandal resistant, very heavy duty. It had about a 3-week lead time. Our first bid package back in May of 2020, similar lead time of about 3 to 4 weeks. Shortly thereafter, the next bid packages, we quickly ramped up to a 5 to 6 month lead time on those projects on obtaining that fixture. It wasn't it was essentially a supply and demand issue. Because of COVID, the demand for bottle fillers increased 300% according to LK, and they just weren't able to keep up with that demand. Luckily, at the beginning of this, at the end of last year, beginning of this year, we put together a solicitation to purchase the LK fixtures directly. So that'll should save about 4 months on our latest bid packages. The contractor won't have to procure those after they get a contract in place. They should be waiting for the contractor or be available shortly after the contract's in place. The one schedule win that we did have is that our design and bidding was pretty much unaffected by COVID, and we were able to remain on schedule by conducting principal meetings online and also using online photo surveys for design and bidding. Like I mentioned earlier, we have about 17 bid packages that have been bid. One is out for bid right now, and then we have 2 packages left that are waiting to be bid. Then we can go on to the next page. The last thing, I won't go through all of these, but I wanted to touch, a lot of these I touched on in my presentation. I did want to emphasize one accomplishment though. The point of this project is to provide safe, quality drinking water to the Portland Public Schools student, staff, and community users. And I'd like to say that this program is actually exceeding those goals. I wanted to actually highlight one fixture at Arleta, which is one of our pilot schools. This fixture tested at 35 parts per billion of lead, over 2 times the state level back in 2018, and it was never turned back on. It remained shut off, so it could not be used. During the pilot program, we were actually able to filter that location, and it was able to be turned on and used during that school year. We tested it, Ed mentioned we did continuous testing. We tested it 18 times, and 17 times it came back as non-detect, and only once did we get a reading of 0.2 parts per billion.
Thank you, Steve. Norm, you have a question?
I was just curious. I mean, it sounds like the filtering is a great solution. I was just kind of curious, the ongoing cost related to the maintenance and replacement, or I don't know how that works with the filter scenario.
Yeah, so obviously the initial installation and the first filter is covered by the bond, and unfortunately after that, it is going to be an operating cost for Portland Public Schools. One of the parts of the program is that these fixtures are a combination of high-low bubbler with a bottle filler. So at every filter location, we're actually getting 3 fixtures. So like in a hallway where you might have 2 or 3 porcelain bubblers currently, we are putting in a drinking water station, which we're essentially reducing the locations throughout the school, but still giving them adequate access to water. And this was part of the pilot program. We looked at that as well to make sure that the students weren't lacking water. So we're trying to reduce the number of locations while still providing the adequate access to water. But in part of the program is trying to be very judicious with these filters so that we're not putting too many of them throughout the school, but we also don't want to we also want to make sure that it's not a hindrance. So we're trying not to limit it too much. Essentially, we've budgeted about 1,200 filters across the district. That was presented to the board back in 2020 when we presented our program, and our estimates is about $250,000 a year to manage that cost.
Yeah, I can only imagine the alternative of replacing piping would be astronomical. So great, thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that. Robert, if you could introduce yourself.
Good evening, committee members and Madam Co-Chair. My name is Robert Joel. I'm one of the project managers with Health and Safety, working in this case specifically with the fire alarm projects. We have actually completed all our requirements of fire alarm projects, bringing our sites up to date as per our agreement with the Portland Fire and Rescue, and we've met our deadline of having that completed by the end of December of 2020. We're very successful in this. We have some funds left over that we're reallocating for use additionally in the health and safety programs. I really can't offer much else other than we had a very successful program that we have completed. Are there any questions along that?
All right. Hearing none, thank you, Robert. We will go ahead and move to the next one. And I will say that for this first report out on health and safety, we've included a little sheet for each of these programs that we've completed. We won't do that the next time around. We'll spare you that. We won't make you go and sit through that same thing over and over. But we did want to give you a full report out for this first one, especially because we do have some new members. And moving on to the roof improvements. And Steve, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Sure thing. Thanks, Maria. I'm Steve Manson, Senior Project Manager with the bond program. So I'm one of the managers for the health and safety. I work with Robert. We've worked together on the fire alarm projects, as well as this the roofing improvements and the ADA, which we'll talk about next. On the roof projects, the bond promise of the 2017 bond was to get to up to 14 roofs. Under that, with the budget that we had originally, we've completed work at over 15 schools throughout the district. Some of those are partial re-roofs, many of them are full re-roofs. A lot of the roof work that we were doing was kind of a continuation of the 2012 bond, as well as kind of some upgrades that happened along the way with input from the maintenance department for which sites were kind of the highest need. There are two sites that we are doing this summer, Dunaway and MLC, that the 2017 bond funded the design for, and we'll talk about later. The 2020 bond is paying for construction, so you will see the Dunaway costs and MLC costs twice there. We do have some funds left over from the 2017 roof funds. We're working on closing out commitments and kind of zeroing in on exactly what that amount is going to be. A lot of that is, we're just trying to get a hold of that and then figure out how much will be returned to then be put forward to other projects. So.
Thank you, Steve. I will just quickly note on the schedule that what you'll see there with Dunaway and MLC, we showed you the construction phase. It's a little bit lighter. That's because you're going to see it again. The construction phase is being funded by 2020. You'll see that show up in the reports for the 2020 roof. And so it's really just there to say, yeah, this is continuing on, and this is when we anticipate doing the work.
Yeah, I forgot to mention Riki is in that same group. That was designed for this summer's construction. Unfortunately, with the kind of extreme cost volatility that we're seeing, especially with the lumber prices, the one bid that we got for that was more than double what our construction design estimates were. And so at the recommendation of pretty much all parties involved, we've decided to put that project on hold and bid it out later in probably early spring 2022 for construction in 2022. And hopefully we'll get better bid prices then. The next portion is accessibility. So the accessibility work in the 2017 bond, just as a reminder, is a little bit different than what the accessibility work in the current 2020 bond is doing. Really, the accessibility work here is kind of combined with the roofing projects. It was an attempt by the district planning at the time to really kind of do two things at once. First off was to try to get accessible sites within each cluster of schools, and at the same time combine our work with roofing and accessibility work into one project to try to attempt to get the most amount of work we could done in one summer with the least amount of disruptions to school sites. And so a lot of the work that was done in the 2017 bond was very high impact things like elevator installs. There were 3 elevators installed over at Rose City Park, MLK, and Wriggler. Those Rose City Park and MLK were in the group 3 and middle school projects, and Wriggler is a standalone elevator that was done with a roof. We also done quite a bit of smaller work like upgrading door hardware and bathrooms. The majority of that work is now spent out and complete. As you can see by the budgeting, there's just a little bit of kind of cleanup work that we are completing in the next month with the middle school projects and with Woodlawn. And we'll have a very small amount of funds that will be left over at the end of this to see what we can do with.
Any questions on accessibility? Okay. Thank you, Steve. Brooke?
Hello, my name is Brooke Bashan, and I'm a construction manager. I've been with the team for about 1.5 years now. So for the security scope of work, we worked very closely with Otis and security services to bring all of the 88 schools in the district up to their standard requirements. The overall scope involved adding video intercoms and card readers at the main and 88 entrances so that all the doors can remain locked at all times outside of passing times. And these devices communicate with the administrative staff's telephone, video telephones, sorry. And so now the staff can see who's standing at those entrances and can control who's entering the building during school. The other key component of our scope was to add emergency broadcast speakers to the common gathering areas in and around the buildings, such as hallways, cafeterias, gyms, playgrounds. And this was to enhance the emergency broadcast system, which was previously only distributed through the staff telephones. So now, if an emergency was to occur and a lockdown or a lockout, evacuate, or a team response event was to happen, everyone in or around the building can hear, not just isolated to the classrooms. So all of that work happened in 2020. It started right before 2020, but it was complete in 2020. So there's one final component that we are wrapping up, which is like a very, very small amount of fencing at 2 sites, Cleveland and Beaumont. And so we're wrapped up with 100% design development documents, and the construction documents are due mid-June. And then pending the permit process, we should be starting construction in August, wrapping up in October. Project risks. Well, the fencing is very straightforward. There's been some civil engineering issues that the design team has been and continues to address, even now as we move into the CD phase. So our cost estimate is not going to be based on a fully understood civil scope yet. So that's definitely a risk. And then also with the price of steel increasing, that could impact our steel fencing. So that's kind of the overall status.
Thank you, Brooke. Are there any questions on the security scope? Dick?
Oh, okay. Actually, maybe I jumped the gun. I really didn't have a question on the security scope. It was sort of a thought, as we look at the various elements of health and safety, it's evident and it makes sense that original budgets and current budgets have moved around. And I wonder if it wouldn't be helpful to have a roll-up table that shows the grand totals for health and safety, because I guess one could get there by adding up the numbers in each of the individual tables, but and maybe this is partly a question for other BAC members to see if they would find that useful too. Does that make sense? Because it's hard to see the whole picture. I assume all of these numbers are still underneath the overall cap, but you can't see that without doing a bunch more math.
Yeah, so have you looked at the health and safety funding report that is in your packets? That is the one that we're not presenting on screen. It is, I think at this point, 3 pages long. But that said, it is showing each of the categories with totals, and it totals all those subtotals to the bottom so that you should be able to.
Oh, thank you.
Will that do it? Okay.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. All right. Thank you, Brooke. We'll go ahead and move on to the 2020 infrastructure. We have 17 minutes to go. All right. So we're going to go through this quickly. I wanted to just quick overview. When we talk about 2020 infrastructure, we're talking about roof, seismic, mechanical, security, ADA, and SPED. SPED meaning SPED learning environments. And that is what we're sort of loosely grouping under infrastructure. It does not include all elements of the 2020 bond besides modernizations, which is to say that it does not include the capacity or technology or curriculum. All 3 of those things are scheduled for our next meeting for updates. So just to kind of put a little framework around it. And not only that, this time around, I think we've said we're really early on into this process. We're working on these implementation plans. We really only have a few things to report out as active projects. These were those sort of low-hanging fruit things. And so you are only going to see reports on roof, seismic, and mechanical tonight. And they should be fairly quick. Fingers crossed. And maybe we will get you out of here on time tonight. So I'm going to turn this back over to, let's see, we're going to start, I believe, with Steve and then move to Clark. And I did want to say before Steve gets going, Clark is one of our new 2020 bond PMs. He is super excited to be presenting here tonight. But I thought this would be a good ease into it, and you can all get to know Clark as well. So we'll start with Steve and then move to Clark.
Perfect. Yep. So as Renee said, hello again. So for the roofs for 2020, the 2 big points I'll hit on is we're just starting our assessment work for that. We have a contract with a roof consultant. We've kind of been in some planning mode over the last several months with internal groups identifying which sites, based on maintenance records, based on maintenance reports, based off of kind of what we're seeing throughout the district, which sites we think are some of the worst that we know that need to be addressed based off of previous reports. And we're working on hiring an outside consultant to come in. That's this bond roof assessments. We're hiring a consultant to come in, do really in-depth survey work and reporting on those 22 sites, and kind of give us a report card on them so we can decide which sites should be getting our attention and kind of in which order and what time frame. So that'll be really helpful. It's kind of some information that we didn't have as good information on with the 2017 bond previously. And so moving forward with this one, this is going to give us a really clear roadmap for kind of where we should be going and why we should be doing it. You'll see more of that in the implementation plan that will be presented on later this month. for the construction work for this bond, for the 2020 bond, I'll pass it off to Clark.
Thank you, Steve. Good evening, everybody. As Marina mentioned, I am very brand new, so be gentle. My name is Clark Ide. I am a new senior project manager with OSM. I have been here now for just a little over a month, so I'm just getting my hands wrapped around a lot of these things. And I was not informed about me having to present anything until early this morning, so this was a surprise for me. So just to, as mentioned by Steve, we have 2 roofing projects that we will be building this summer that went out to bid and have been approved by the board at yesterday's meeting. That will be work at Dunaway and MLC. These are pretty straightforward. We'll get them started as soon as school is out and the buildings are available, and then obviously we have to get them done before people come back. That is what I've learned about working for PPS. There's a short window to do some work. I will say the risks that everyone else has mentioned around market volatility and material availability are going to be inherent on these projects as well. We've already had conversations with the selected contractors. They are working in advance on getting all the materials they'll need ahead of time as best they can, knowing that prices are kind of all over the place right now on a lot of these things. So I think that's really all I have to update. If anybody has any questions.
Okay, not seeing any. Thank you, Clark. Stellar first job. All right, we'll move on to seismic. And Robert, back to you.
Good evening again, everyone. I have been working on the seismic upgrade projects that we're doing this summer, specifically Lent Elementary. We are performing a 2-summer, I don't want to say a 2-year project because we have the summer months only to work in. We have gone out to bid, and as of last night, it was awarded to the successful contractor. We are really looking forward to doing this project, and we're very fortunate in we have received a $2.5 million matching SRGP grant, which is really helping us out a lot. Along that line, we also received a matching grant for the Creative Sciences building, which we will be developing for future upgrade. Our biggest risks are material costs, as with everybody has mentioned. We have coordinated pretty well with Chris with the paint. We're working with him, making sure we don't overlap each other. And we've also reached out to Glenn to double check any asbestos. We are going to be doing work in the basement, and we will be doing some abatement under there. Really looking forward to this project. It's going to be pretty intense, but we're very confident that we can get the majority of the work done in the first phase. And that is about what I have to offer. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I have one, although I don't know if it's for you, Robert, or Marina. So if I look at the budget, you had an unallocated funds originally of 17.2 million, and yet the seismic totals add to 20.5 million. Why isn't the unallocated funds the difference between 8.6 and 17.2? How did you get more money to unallocate than what you started out with? Am I missing something?
So the budget, and this is another thing that I've been thinking about, how we can better show this, but whenever we get grant funds,
okay.
add to the budget.
All right.
So with 2.5 million,
yeah,
we added to the budget. And I will say too that we were very fortunate. We were able to leverage funds from the facilities and asset management side of PPS, which is to say the general fund funded portion. We utilize their funds to do the design work to allow us to move forward immediately into construction with the SRGP grant and the 2020 seismic funds. So,
thank you.
Any other questions that Marina can answer? If
All
not,
right.
thank you.
Thank you, Robert. And mechanical, Steve?
Sure thing. So on the mechanical, so you'll see there we have one commitment that's moving forward. That's our assessment work. We've kind of the same thing with the roofs. We've had a lot of internal meetings trying to work through the thought and implementation of exactly what is going to be addressed with this work. And we're currently hiring an outside design consultant to come in and take a look at all of our record information, our work orders, our energy data, and help us to generate a list of sites that we need to look at for upgrades, as well as give recommendations for upgrades at those sites. That plan will be complete sometime in August. We're also right now about to start going out for a design RFP for the design of those upgrades. So kind of we're doing a little bit of a kind of phased approach here where we're figuring out what we're going to be doing, but we're also working to get ahead of our deadlines that we have to kind of figure out who our dance partner is before we know what the song, so to speak. It's it's all with the goal of starting construction with this mechanical work in summer 2022.
Questions? All right. Any overall questions, comments, or discussion? I think hands are popping up. Greg?
Well, not about the program, thank you. I found it very interesting. I did have a question, a couple of things. One, has there been any discussion at our next meeting about meeting in person? And secondly, we had talked about doing a tour of Kellogg.
We have not had any discussion yet about meeting in person. We have not started doing in-person, like in-office work or in-person board meetings yet. So I will have to take my cues from leadership as far as when that's going to be considered an approved activity. We'll keep you informed. I totally understand. We are all very anxious to see each other's faces, and it does make a difference in how we do these. And then the Kellogg Tour, I am going to ask Lauren to help me get that scheduled.
Thank you.
Certainly.
I don't know if you can see me, but I did nod an agreement to schedule.
Thank you. And let's see. Oh goodness, sometimes it's hard to see the hands go up, but Kenichi, if you're still with us, would you like to finish us out?
I am still here. I had to go off video because I have kids running around. Again, another great meeting. Thank you to everyone who presented. It was really great to see the staff and hear of all the success that you've been able to accomplish over this time. I think the group's quietness and just really enjoying the presentations was an acknowledgement of the hard work that's been put in. So thank you for today. It's 7:26. We have 4 minutes left to spare, and I think we can call this meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, everyone.